She should have left them to die. 4 giant wolves frozen in cursed ice, a death trap built to kill anyone foolish enough to care. But when this worthless Omega risked everything to save them, the storm changed like something ancient had just awakened. And one of those dying wolves wasn't just anyone, he was the one man she should never have touched. Before we even begin, I need you. Omegas like Velisara are treated as nothing, discarded, forgotten, left to die in the cold. This channel tells the stories of the unheard, the unwanted, the ones the world calls worthless. If you believe no one deserves to be thrown away, don't just watch. Be part of this movement. Subscribe now so we can prove to the world that voices like hers matter. 1 subscriber at a time, let's build a pack that protects the broken instead of abandoning them. Now, let's begin. They taught her that an Omega's life was worth less than winter firewood. Velisara Embermorn learned this truth before she could even speak. 20 winters had carved it into her bones, each year adding another layer of scars, some visible, most not. In the Drake and Shade pack, hierarchy wasn't just law, it was gospel. And Omegas like her existed at the very bottom, beneath even the Omega designation itself, because her wolf had never properly awakened. The morning rations proved it again. Velisara stood in line behind 30 other pack members in the communal hall, her worn leather boots barely holding together against the stone floor's cold. When her turn came, the beta distributing food, a thick-necked man named Garen, looked through her as if she were smoke. "Move along," he grunted, handing her a piece of bread half the size of what he'd given the wolf before her.
She didn't argue.
Argument was a privilege reserved for those who mattered. The Great Frost had descended 6 weeks ago, choking the western realms in ice and snow unlike anything the elders could remember. Rivers froze solid. Trees split open from the cold. Game vanished into whatever depths could shelter them. The pack stores dwindled, and with scarcity came cruelty. Velisara felt it in every interaction. The shoves that sent her stumbling. The whispers that followed her like carrion birds. Broken wolf. Failed shift. Waste of food. Her wolf stirred occasionally in her chest, a faint ember that never quite caught fire. Where others manifested strength, speed, healing, Velisara manifested nothing. Or so they believed. That afternoon, Elder Morvain summoned her to the council hall. Velisara entered the stone chamber, its walls decorated with ancestral tapestries and the mounted heads of conquered enemies. 5 elders sat in judgment, their eyes cold as the wind outside. Velisara Embermorn, Morvain's voice cracked like ice. "You will retrieve supplies from the Whisperwood outpost. The cart is prepared." Velisara's stomach dropped. The Whisperwood outpost lay 3 days' journey beyond pack borders, through valleys where the Great Frost hit hardest. No one had returned from that route in weeks. "Elder, the storms. Are you refusing?" Another elder leaned forward, teeth bared slightly. Under old pack law, refusal of a direct command meant execution. Acceptance might mean death too, but at least it wasn't certain.
"No, Elder."
"I accept." Morvain's lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile.
"Good.
You leave within the hour." Velisara bowed and left, understanding perfectly. This wasn't duty. This was disposal. An hour later, she stood at the pack's northern gate, dragging a wooden cart behind her. One wheel was cracked. The ropes were frayed. They'd given her provisions for 1 day, not 6. Snow fell in thick sheets, erasing the world beyond 50 paces. No one came to see her off. No one wished her safe travel. Velisara adjusted the rope across her shoulders, feeling its bite through her threadbare cloak, and stepped into the white. Behind her, the gates closed with finality. Ahead, the Great Frost waited. And somewhere beyond the veil of snow, for wolves were drowning in ice. The cold was alive. Velisara understood this within the first hour. This wasn't the clean, sharp cold of winter mornings, or even the brutal cold of mountain passes. This cold had teeth. It bit through wool and leather, through skin, through hope itself. The great frost didn't just freeze, it consumed. The cart groaned behind her, its cracked wool catching on every buried stone and ice ridge. Twice within the first mile, the rope had cut through her palms despite the cloth wrapping. Blood mixed with snow, painting brief crimson tracks before the wind erased them. She walked. The wilderness stretched endlessly, a landscape carved from bone and shadow. Pine trees bent under impossible weights of ice, their branches snapping periodically like distant rifle shots. The wind didn't howl. It screamed, a sustained note that made her teeth ache. And beneath it all lay a silence, so profound it felt predatory, as if the world itself was watching her fail. "You've always been good at failing," her mother's voice whispered from memory. Velisara was 7 the first time she'd been denied supper for a week. Her wolf hadn't manifested on her birthday, as it should have, and the pack saw no reason to waste food on defective bloodlines. She'd learned to chew pine bark then, to melt snow for water, to make herself so small she could slip between the cracks of cruelty. She used those skills now. By midday, though the sky remained a uniform gray that made time meaningless, the cart's wheels split completely. The crack echoed like a declaration. Velisara stared at the broken wood, then at the impossible distance still ahead, and laughed. The sound came out broken, barely human. She tied the cart's frame to her waist and dragged it like a corpse. Hours blurred together. The cold stopped hurting after a while, which Velisara knew was dangerous. Numbness was how freezing claimed you, gently, like sleep. She forced herself to feel the pain, to catalog each frozen finger, each burning breath. Something was wrong with the storm. She'd survived winters before, but this felt deliberate. The wind changed direction without reason, driving her away from shelter. Ice formed in patterns too geometric to be natural, creating barriers where paths should be. Twice, she could have sworn she saw shadows moving parallel to her course, large shapes that vanished when she turned to look. As twilight approached, or what passed for it in the endless gray, Velisara stumbled. Her knees hit ice hard enough to crack it. For a long moment, she remained there, breathing clouds of white into the screaming wind. It would be easy to stop, to simply let the cold finish what the elders had started. But her wolf stirred then, that stubborn ember in her chest, and Velisara remembered something her grandmother had told her before she died. Survival isn't strength, it's spite. She stood. That was when she heard it. Not the wind. Not ice cracking. Something else, low, broken, almost rhythmic. Like breathing. Like something dying. The river valley opened before her, and Velisara's heart stopped. For massive shapes lay frozen along the bank, half submerged in crystalline death. They were too large to be ordinary wolves. Velisara approached slowly, her boots crunching across the frozen river's edge. Each shape was massive, easily twice the size of any wolf she'd ever seen, their bodies locked in ice thick as castle walls. Frost clung to their fur in delicate patterns, turning them into sculptures of silver and shadow. But they were breathing. Shallow, labored breaths that created tiny clouds of condensation above their muzzles. How long had they been here? Hours? Days? The ice suggested the latter, yet somehow they clung to life. The first wolf was gray, its coat marked with scars that spoke of countless battles. The second and third were brown and silver respectively, their builds suggesting speed and power. But it was the fourth that made Velisara's breath catch. Black fur. Massive even among giants. And eyes, ash-colored eyes that should have been glazed with cold but instead burned with terrible clarity, fixed directly on her. The wolf watched her with an intelligence that made her skin prickle. Not pleading. Not desperate. Simply observing. as if measuring her worth in the seconds before death claimed him. Belisara should have walked away. Every instinct screamed at her to conserve her strength, to continue toward the outpost or find shelter. These wolves weren't her responsibility. She had no tools, no warmth to spare, no reason to sacrifice herself for beasts, no matter how extraordinary, that would die regardless. The black wolf's gaze didn't waver. Survival isn't strength, her grandmother's voice echoed. It's spite. Damn you, Belisara whispered, though she wasn't sure if she meant the wolf, the elders, or herself. She dropped to her knees and began to dig.
Pause for a second.
Look at what she's doing. No one helped Belisara. No one saved her. Yet here she is, bleeding, freezing, breaking herself to save strangers. If a girl everyone calls worthless can still save lives, you can click subscribe and stand with her. Don't just watch heroes. Support them. Be part of this pack. Be part of this heart. Subscribe if you believe compassion still exists. Let's continue. Her hands found the cart's broken wheel first, its fractured wood sharp enough to chip at ice. She slammed it down again and again, each impact sending shockwaves through her frozen arms. The ice was thick, unnaturally so, formed in layers that suggested days of accumulation. Blood welled from her palms where wood splinters pierced cloth and skin. Her body shook so violently, she could barely maintain her grip. But she kept working, moving from wolf to wolf, breaking ice, creating channels of freedom. The wolves didn't thrash or whine. They remained eerily still, watching her with that same disciplined silence. Like soldiers awaiting orders. Like they understood what she was attempting and refused to complicate it with panic. It took hours. By the time Belisara freed the first wolf, the gray one, darkness had claimed the valley completely. She used the cart's ropes to create a makeshift harness, looping it beneath the massive body. Her muscles screamed as she pulled, dragging dead weight across ice, toward the rock overhang she'd spotted earlier. Then the second wolf. The third. Each one heavier than anything she should have been able to move. But she moved them. The black wolf came last. He was the largest, the deepest frozen, and when she finally broke through to his limbs, their eyes met again. Something passed between them, recognition, perhaps. Or promise. Belisara tied the final rope around his chest and pulled. Her vision blurred. Her hands were ribbons of blood and frost. The cart-turned sled scraped across stone and ice, carrying impossible cargo toward inadequate shelter. But she pulled, because an omega worth less than firewood had chosen to burn anyway. The rock overhang was barely adequate, a shallow depression in the valley wall where wind couldn't reach directly and stone might hold some memory of warmth. Belisara dragged the last wolf into position and collapsed against the frozen ground, her lungs burning, her vision swimming with exhaustion. But she couldn't stop yet.
Fire.
She needed fire, or they would all die before dawn. Her numb fingers fumbled through the cart's wreckage, finding the small kindling bundle she'd wrapped in oilcloth before leaving. Miraculously, it remained dry. She gathered dead branches from nearby pines, their wood brittle with cold, and built a small cairn of combustibles. The flint took 6 tries to spark, her hands shaking too violently for precision. The 7th attempt caught. Flame bloomed like a prayer answered, small and fragile, but alive. Belisara fed it carefully, coaxing it larger until heat began to push back against the impossible cold. Only then did she turn to the wolves. They lay in a rough semicircle, bodies steaming slightly as ice melted from their fur. Massive. Silent. Still watching her with that unsettling awareness. Belisara tore strips from her already tattered cloak, dipped them in snow she'd melted near the fire, and began cleaning visible wounds. The gray wolf had a gash along his shoulder. The brown one's paw was torn. She worked methodically, whispering meaningless comfort as she pressed cloth to injuries, her medical knowledge limited to what she'd learned from tending herself. When she reached for her food bundle, 2 pieces of dried meat and a heel of bread, hunger clawed at her stomach. She'd eaten nothing since the meager breakfast. But the wolves needed strength more than she did. Velisara divided the meat into portions and offered them, placing pieces near each muzzle. "Eat," she murmured. "Please." The wolves exchanged glances. Actually exchanged glances, like humans conferring silently, before accepting the offering with careful deliberation. Not ravenous. Not animal. Considered. Something was profoundly wrong here. As the fire crackled, the wolves shifted position subtly. The gray one moved to block the eastern gap, where wind slipped through. The brown and silver wolves repositioned to create a windbreak along the northern exposure. They were coordinating, protecting her. The black wolf remained closest to the fire, his ash-colored eyes never leaving her face. Velisara's hand trembled as she reached toward him, toward a cut above his eye that still wept blood. "Let me help," she whispered. He lowered his massive head in permission. Her fingers touched fur, and the world shifted. The black wolf's tongue swept across her bleeding palm where splinters had shredded skin, and heat exploded through her, not burning, but warming from within. Like embers catching. Like her dormant wolf suddenly gasping awake. Velisara jerked back, heart hammering. The black wolf watched her with something that looked disturbingly like understanding. "You're not," she began, then stopped. "How did you ask wolves if they were human?" But she spoke to them anyway, instinct overriding reason. "Stay close to the fire. Conserve your strength. The storm will worsen before dawn." 4 wolves turned their heads toward her in perfect unison. The black wolf lowered himself closer to her side, a gesture of obedience? Protection? Something in between. Outside their fragile shelter, the wind scream changed pitch. The storm was intensifying, and now Velisara heard something else beneath it. Distant sounds that might have been voices. Or predators. Or both. She fed the fire, and tried not to think about the ancient warmth still burning beneath her skin where the wolf's tongue had touched. Velisara woke to voices. For a moment, she thought she was dreaming, exhaustion playing tricks with the wind's howl. But the words were too clear, too deliberate, spoken in tones barely above whisper. "Can't maintain the binding much longer. The storm is targeted. They know we're here. If she hadn't found us, she shouldn't have been here. This route hasn't seen travelers in weeks." Velisara's eyes snapped open. The fire had burned low, casting dancing shadows across the rock wall. The 4 wolves lay positioned exactly as before, but now their stillness felt different. Deliberate. Like soldiers feigning sleep. The gray wolf's mouth hadn't moved, yet she could have sworn the last voice came from his direction. "I know you're awake," she said quietly. 4 pairs of eyes opened in unison. Velisara's heart hammered against her ribs as the gray wolf shifted. Not fully. Just his front legs, bones cracking and reforming until paws became hands. Human hands, scarred and calloused, before reverting back to fur within a heartbeat. Merciful ancestors, Velisara breathed. "We couldn't reveal ourselves while bound," the gray wolf said, his voice emerging impossibly from a lupin throat. "The concealment magic prevents full transformation until strength returns." Werewolves. They were werewolves. But not just any. Royal Guard. The brown wolf spoke now, her voice female and sharp with authority. Sworn to the 7 kingdoms under blood oath. Velisara's gaze snapped to the black wolf, who remained silent, watching her with those burning ash-colored eyes. And him. The 3 guards exchanged weighted glances. "We cannot say," the silver wolf replied, male voice tight with protocol. "His identity is protected by ancient law. Cannot or will not. Both." The gray wolf's tone held finality. "What matters is this. Enemies tracked us into this valley. The storm isn't natural, it's blood magic, designed to kill anyone within these boundaries. This place is a trap. The wind shrieked as if confirming his words, and Velisara suddenly understood the geometric ice patterns, the targeted wind shifts. Someone had weaponized winter itself. Then we leave, she said, already calculating supplies and distance. You don't understand. The brown wolf, guard, pulled herself closer to the fire. You were sent here deliberately. We heard your pack's elders through the ice while you worked. They knew this valley was cursed. They sent you to die. The words landed like physical blows. Velisara had suspected, but hearing it confirmed, knowing they disposed of her with such calculated cruelty. The old pack accords forbid such actions. The Silver Guard continued, anger threading his tone. Sending pack members into certain death violates sacred law. Your elders are oath breakers. Velisara laughed, the sound bitter and sharp. They're elders. Laws don't apply to those with power. They do to us. The Black Wolf spoke for the first time, his voice deep enough to resonate in her chest. And they will answer. The promise in those words sent shivers through her that had nothing to do with cold. Outside, the storm's pitch changed again, and through the white curtain of snow, Velisara saw them. Silhouettes. At least a dozen, moving with predatory precision through the blizzard. Too coordinated to be lost travelers. Too deliberate to be anything but hunters. The royal guards rose as one, their exhaustion forgotten, their bodies tensing for battle despite their weakened state. And the Black Wolf positioned himself directly between Velisara and the approaching shadows, his stance declaring something that made her blood sing with terrified wonder. Mine to protect. They came through the blizzard like nightmares given form. Velisara counted 12, no, 15, figures materializing from the white. Werewolves, their eyes glowing with predatory intent, weapons gleaming with ice and steel. Assassins.
Rival pack warriors.
All converging on their fragile shelter with lethal purpose. The royal guard shifted. Bone cracked.
Fur receded.
3 wolves became 3 warriors mid-leap, their transformation explosive and terrifying. Steel rang as they drew weapons that had been concealed in the magic, swords, daggers, instruments of royal protection. They moved like liquid violence, still weakened but deadly. But there were too many enemies. Left flank. Velisara's voice cut through the chaos, instinct overriding fear. Gray, the one with the axe. The gray guard pivoted without question, meeting the axe-wielder's charge with brutal efficiency. Velisara didn't know how she knew where attacks would come from, only that she did. Her mind mapped the battle like a tactician born to it. Silver, fall back 3 paces. Brown, cover his retreat. They obeyed. Not because she commanded authority, but because her words felt right, as if she were the missing piece that made them whole. The guards fought with renewed coordination, their movements synchronized through her direction. The storm screamed louder. Wind lashed with unnatural fury, responding to Velisara's racing heartbeat, her desperate focus. Ice formed where she needed barriers. Snow blinded enemies when her fear spiked. The blood magic woven into the blizzard was reacting to her. An enemy warrior noticed. The Omega. She's the anchor. Kill her. They are literally trying to kill her because she dared to matter. The world always hunts the ones who refuse to stay small. Villains count on silence. They count on people watching and doing nothing. If you're still watching right now, you're already emotionally here. Don't be the person who walks away while she's fighting for her life.
Subscribe.
Join the pack. Stand with Velisara. Let's continue. Because if people like you don't stand up, people like her keep suffering. 3 assassins broke formation, charging directly at Velisara. She had no weapons, no training, nothing but instinct and the broken cart handle she grabbed desperately. The Black Wolf roared. The sound shattered ice and sent shockwaves through the valley. He shifted mid-charge, Massive, powerful, his human form radiating authority that made enemies falter. He tore through attackers with savage precision, protecting Belisara with a ferocity that transcended duty. But an arrow found its mark. Pain exploded in Belisara's shoulder, her vision widening out. She fell, blood spreading across snow, her consciousness fragmenting. The storm convulsed in response, becoming a living hurricane. Through dimming vision, Belisara saw the black wolf dispatch the last assassin, then turned to her. He shifted back to wolf form and lifted her gently in his massive jaws, carrying her deeper into the shelter as the battle raged. His ash-colored eyes met hers, and she understood. She wasn't just a survivor anymore. She was the center around which kingdoms would turn. The black wolf set her down gently, and the world shifted. Bone cracked, muscle reformed. The massive wolf became a man, tall, scarred, radiating power that made the air itself feel heavy. His bare skin bore marks Belisara had only seen in ancient tapestries, crown scars that wrapped around his biceps in perfect geometric patterns, sigils of the 7 kingdoms branded across his chest, and eyes, those ash-colored eyes, that held centuries of command. Tharvak's ashen claw, Belisara whispered, blood loss making her voice thin. Alpha King. This is bigger than a story now. She didn't just save wolves. She saved a kingdom. She saved the Alpha King himself. And she did it while everyone believed she was nothing. If you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever been told you were worthless, this story is for you. Don't just be a viewer. Be a founding member of this movement. Subscribe now, and let's build a legion that proves the forgotten can change destinies. Let's continue. He knelt beside her, his expression fierce. How did you know? Everyone knows the crown marks. Her laugh came out wet. Even Omega's worth less than firewood. Pain flashed across his face, not from injury, but something deeper. Tell me true. Your pack sent you to die. Yes. Knowing this valley was cursed. Yes. Thunder rolled through Tharvax's chest, a sound that promised violence. They broke the old accords. They will answer for. I'm dying, Belisara interrupted simply. The arrow had pierced deep, and warmth spread across her side in ways that meant internal bleeding. Vengeance can wait.
No.
The word was absolute. Tharvax pressed his palm to her wound, and his voice dropped into something ancient. I invoke the ancient ember oath. My strength to yours. My life to sustain yours. Blood to blood, wolf to wolf, until the bond is sealed. Light exploded between them. Not burning, igniting. Belisara gasped as power flooded through her, knitting torn flesh, mending broken vessels. But more than that, something deeper awakened. The ember in her chest that had slumbered for 20 years suddenly roared to life. Her wolf emerged, not with claws or fangs, but with warmth. Golden red light emanated from her skin like living coals, spreading outward in waves that touched the guards, the shelter, the valley itself. Where her power reached, the storm gentled. Ice melted to reveal frozen grass. The weaponized blizzard retreated from her presence, as if recognizing something older than its malice. Belisara's wolf didn't dominate. It unified. She felt the guards' exhaustion ease. Their wounds began healing faster. The valley transformed into sanctuary, protected not by force, but by her very existence. Ember bonded, the gray guard breathed with reverence. A keystone Omega. They're myths. Not myths, Tharvax said quietly, his eyes never leaving Belisara's face. Legends. Then the Alpha King of the 7 Kingdoms did something that shattered reality itself. He knelt before her. Not in submission, but in acknowledgement. In recognition of power that had nothing to do with dominance and everything to do with what truly sustained kingdoms. Unity, sacrifice, and the quiet strength that held broken things together. You saved us all, Tharvax said. my king." The remaining enemies fled. Velisara watched them scatter through the now gentle snow, their terror palpable even at distance. They'd come to kill an Alpha King and found something far more terrifying, a power that didn't conquer but sustained, that transformed battlefields into sanctuaries. The 3 royal guards approached, their movements formal despite their injuries. As one, they knelt beside their king, fists pressed to hearts in ancient salute. "We swear fealty," the Grey Guard spoke for them all, "to the ember-bonded Omega who sheltered us." Velisara Embermorn, keystone of the 7 kingdoms.
"I'm nobody," Velisara whispered, "or overwhelmed.
Just an Omega who defied death to save strangers," Tharvax interrupted gently. "Who led warriors without dominance. Who awakened a power thought extinct for 3 centuries." He stood, offering his hand. "You were never nobody, Velisara. Your pack simply feared what you represented. Which is proof that strength isn't dominance. It's responsibility." Tharvax's expression hardened as he turned toward the north, toward Drakenshade territory. "Your elders violated the old accords. They sent pack blood to certain death. By crown law, they will answer for it." His voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "And I hereby declare, Omegas across all 7 kingdoms are under royal protection. Any who harm them answer to me." The decree settled over the valley like a benediction. Velisara felt tears freeze on her cheeks. 20 years of being worthless, and now, "I don't understand," she said. "What am I?" Ember-bonded Omegas were the original peacekeepers, Tharvax explained, settling beside her. "They didn't fight, they strengthened those who did. United fractured packs. Turned enemies into allies through sheer force of unity. Your lineage was lost when war became valued over balance." Velisara looked at her hands, still glowing faintly with golden red light. She felt the guards' exhaustion easing, their wounds closing faster in her presence. Felt the valley itself responding to her, protective and warm. She didn't make herself stronger. She made everything stronger. "The 7 kingdoms need you," Tharvax said quietly. "Will you come?" Velisara thought of the Drakenshade pack, of elders who'd sent her to die, of 20 years spent being invisible. Then she thought of 4 wolves drowning in ice, of the choice she'd made to burn rather than fade. "Yes," she said, "but not as property. Not as something owned." Tharvax's smile held centuries of wisdom. As an equal. As the living reminder that true strength is measured not in those we conquer, but in those we sustain. The storm had passed. Dawn broke over the valley, painting ice in shades of amber and gold. And Velisara Embermorn, the Omega worth less than firewood, rose to meet it. The news traveled faster than the winter wind. By the time they reached the capital, the fortress city of Iron Peak, where the 7 kingdoms converged, word had already spread. An Omega had saved the Alpha King. An Ember Bonded had awakened. The Drakenshade pack had violated sacred law. The streets filled with curious eyes as Velisara walked beside Tharvax, no longer dragging a broken cart, but wearing simple traveling clothes that somehow felt more dignified than any royal garment. Guards flanked them, but not as captors. As equals. The Drakenshade elders arrived in chains 3 days later, their authority stripped by royal decree. They'd expected execution. Instead, Tharvax sentenced them to serve the very Omegas they'd oppressed, to learn through labor what they'd refused to understand through compassion. "You wanted to rid yourselves of the weak," he told them coldly. "Instead, you revealed your own weakness. True leaders protect those who cannot protect themselves." Velisara was offered everything. Titles.
Land.
Gold enough to rebuild her life 1,000 times over. She refused it all, asking instead for one thing, the authority to reform how Omegas were treated across all kingdoms. Not as charity, she told the assembled lords and pack leaders.
As law.
as recognition that every wolf serves a purpose, even those who do not fight. They called her the Ember Queen, though she wore no crown. She became the voice for those who'd been silenced, the shield for those deemed worthless. Beside Tharvax, she helped reshape laws centuries old, not through force, but through the same stubborn compassion that had made her dig 4 wolves from ice. Winter still came each year.
Snow still fell.
Cold still bit. But now, when storms raged, Omegas were sheltered first. When food grew scarce, the vulnerable ate before the strong. The Great Frost had taught the 7 kingdoms a lesson written in blood and ember. Survival required unity, not hierarchy. On the castle wall overlooking Iron Peak, Velisara stood beside the Alpha King as evening descended. Not beneath him, not behind him, beside him. Do you ever regret that day? Tharvax asked quietly. The choice you made in the valley? Velisara touched the faint scar on her shoulder where the arrow had struck, feeling the warmth of her wolf beneath. I learned something that day. Being small isn't the same as being weak. And being strong means carrying others when they cannot walk. She looked at the kingdom sprawling before them, at lights beginning to glow in windows, at smoke rising from hearths where families gathered. True strength, she said, was never about who you could conquer. It's about who you choose to save. And in the heart of 7 kingdoms, an Omega who'd once been worth less than firewood became the flame that kept them all alive. If you stayed till the end, you are officially in the pack. Thank you for listening to the story of someone the world tried to erase. Every like, every comment, every subscription gives power to stories like this. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. Don't leave this story behind. Be part of what comes next. Together, we protect the weak, challenge injustice, and celebrate courage. Welcome to the pack.